Welcome back to Retro Bros 2018. So it's been a while, but it's good to be back. And it's good to be doing a video that's long in the making. We're going to be talking about some games from our Dreamcast collection. You might remember a video we did a long time ago where we picked up a load of Dreamcast games. Well, today we're going to talk about some of the top Dreamcast games that you can play. Now, there isn't the time to talk about as many as we'd like. Of course, there's games like Worms Armageddon, or Marvel vs. Capcom 1 and 2, or Soul Calibur, or even Shenmue 1 and 2, or newer games that have been released like Pierce Solar, which was released only a few years ago on the Dreamcast. But today I'm going to be talking about 5 games that mean a lot to me and that represent my time playing the Dreamcast. Now there will be a part 2 to this video with another Retro Bro talking about some top games that he would choose, and it's good to see the different generations and to see what he's picked as opposed to what I've picked. So it's only fitting that the first game I talk about for the last Sega console is Sonic. So Sonic Adventure on the Dreamcast. Now the reason I've chosen this game is because it was really special to me when I was playing this, and I remember it being really revolutionary to the style of Sonic. It visually was incredible, but it kept the charm of the original Sonic. I remember when I first played this game, it was mind-blowingly good graphics, you know, the whales coming out of the water and sort of smashing up the bridge that you run across, and I remember that being on the trailer and thinking, this is going to be incredible, but also just the adventure element and exploring different places and the different music they have. It was so atmospheric. I used to spend hours just walking around the town and talking to the random people who were there. One of the first games that you could just talk to people in the street, you know, and Sonic was integrated into actual society. Also in this game they introduced a new villain character. They kept Dr. Robotnik in there, but the main villain, the main bad boss, is someone called Chaos. He's a sort of god water-like creature that every time he absorbs a Chaos Emerald, he transforms into this another really hard boss, and they kept that danger and that difficulty and also that sinister nature of the villain. The big change of this game was being able to play as different characters in such detail. And they all intertwine together, like you cross over and you know that Sonic's just been here. The difference of Sonic's storyline being traditional run-through as opposed to, say, Knuckles' storyline. Knuckles, it's sort of a bit more free roaming. You go around and it's all about exploring and trying to find shards of the Master Emerald.
Where in the world am I?
One of the things that definitely should be mentioned about this game is the sort of mini games or the side game aspects of the games. Like you've got bumper carts in there. The games where you are on a snowboard hurtling down a mountain. And this was the very first time that this game brought all of these things together. One of the biggest mini-game aspects of the game were in the Chow Gardens. Now the thing is about the Chows, they develop differently depending on how you treat them. And then you can enter them into the Chow races and, like, you know, you can bet with your friends. I remember putting a Chow onto the VMUs, the memory cards, and bringing it into like school with me and having it like a Tamagotchi. I remember it being like, the fact that integrated with the game was incredible. So overall, Sonic Adventure, if you haven't played it, you should, and if you have played it, you should definitely replay it. Either way, it should be in your collection. The next game I'm going to come to in the collection is a game called Headhunter. I came to this game quite late actually. This was one of the games that we picked up from our trip to the caravan. If you like 80s and 90s action films, it's like immersing yourself inside one of those films with a character Jack Wade.
You were the best, Wade.
Do I know you?
Maybe this'll jog your memory.
He was one of the top bounty hunters, and the game starts with you sort of starting, and he's got this severe amnesia, he's escaping from this lab, and then he finds out that he was this bounty hunter and his license revoked. So you spend the game doing these Layla tests, which is a really cool way to tackle the training aspect of the game. You know, you always have to train and get better and whatever, but in the form of these tests, it becomes really fun. They're like mini games, and it's the same with your bike that you ride around on. You have to do license tests to get better and to race and to see if you can beat your score. What's interesting about this game is it's sort of created its own genre. It brings elements of things like Grand Theft Auto. It's a sandbox-based game where you run around and, you know, there's beat 'em up aspects to it, and you take down villains. All of these little things put together it makes the game very individual. The game itself is really story driven.
Angela must have the key card.
And you can sit there playing it for hours. There are adverts that are sort of propaganda videos about this energy drink that everyone's drinking, and it's very Total Recall. As the game progresses, it takes some real twists in the storyline and gets quite dark, bringing in aspects of, like I was saying, different games, like a bit Resident Evil. There's these sort of monsters at the end, these people that have been experimented on and sort of become monster-esque. So graphically, this game again is one on the Dreamcast that took advantage of the Dreamcast's power, and even today when you play it, the graphics sort of still hold up. So if you want a game to play that's full of charm, that's like action-packed, that is really cool, it's got a lot of style to it, and one that's just really fun and immersive to play, I would definitely suggest to pick up Headhunter. So the next game I'm going to come to, or games, are Power Stone 1 and Power Stone 2.
Welcome to Power Stone War!
Yahoo!
Turret 1, are you ready?
Power Stone is a game that just brings a smile to my face whenever I think about it, because it's a game that we played so much. It's a really competitive arcade style beat 'em up, and it's arcade perfect because actually it was ported just a few months after it was released in the arcade straight onto the Dreamcast. The graphics are fun, sort of anime style, so they're quite timeless, because even today if you play it, it's not something that you're going to be scrutinising on. With this anime style, the game was so popular that an anime was actually released afterwards. The gameplay itself is quite different to other beat-em-ups that you would play because it has a 3D style, and the levels, they have loads of little secret things that you can find and use. So the concept of the Power Stones is, in and amongst the items you have these big gems, and if you get 3 of them, you have that classic sort of anime power-up style super version of themselves, and you can either shoot your weapons or you can use your super moves, which just annihilates the enemy. Now, number 1 was a really sort of groundbreaking individual game. You would play it 2-player, it's very much a 2-player beat 'em up. The reason we're talking about number 2 as well is because it is one of the perfect sequels you can have to a game like that. It has all the charm of number 1, but also it's 4-player. It incorporates a adventure mode to the game, so the levels are more interactive. You start on a level and you're fighting, and then suddenly the whole place starts to set fire, so you need to jump from ledge to ledge to get to the second part of the game, or you're on a big floating aircraft and then it starts falling from the sky, and then you have a mid-flight battle. There's a weapon shop, so all the weapons that you play with in the game, you can find different weapons in the game, take them to the shop, combine them to make new weapons. Also, you have characters that you can unlock. One of the main characters, you can unlock his dad, who has very similar moves, but they're slightly different. They're more powerful, but they're not as accurate. There are also some unlockable levels in Power Stone 2, and they're really nicely designed, and you can see that a lot of work and just a lot of imagination has gone into creating these levels and mapping them out. So, Power Stone 1 and 2 are definitely 2 top games you should have in your Dreamcast collection. So the next game we're coming to on our list is Spider-Man. You would think it's an unusual choice to choose something like Spider-Man, but this is quite a special Spider-Man. This Spider-Man is the first ever 3D version of Spider-Man made, and for us, it's still probably the best version.
Technology is the light that will cut through the darkness.
This game has a really solid storyline and gameplay throughout. The gameplay is just fluid. You go from level to level, even from the off. The action starts straight away and you get thrown into using your web slingers and getting through the level. It makes learning how to use the character a lot more fun, because sometimes you can get that laboured training mode of the game and you have to sort of crawl through it. This one, you're straight in. You can see a lot of love and care has gone into it. It starts with being voiced over by Stan Lee.
Welcome, true believers and newcomers alike. Spider-Man co-creator Stan Lee here. Once again, we find our hero Peter Parker, better known around the world as the Amazing Spider-Man, in a heap of trouble.
He voices over the game, he sort of narrates it. But also you get cameos from almost every person from the Marvel world in there. As well as the characters, in the game there are really great bosses. They go from level to level and they get harder and harder, whether it be Rhino, or whether it be the Vulture, or whether it be Mysterio, or the last boss, Doc Ock, which have just had so much work and effort put into them. The difficulty of the game, I think, is pitched at a really nice level. It starts fairly challenging from the off, but it steadily increases and gets harder and harder. I think Spider-Man strikes a really nice balance of being challenging but being fun to get through.
Okay, quit shooting the lasers.
But also they get quite dark and scary sometimes, like with characters like Carnage or Venom. When you are chasing Venom, who eventually comes on side with you, he takes you down into the sewers and he writes on the wall and you can hear him whispering. It creates that atmosphere even in this comic book style world. So this game did originally come out on the PlayStation and the N64 and was then ported to the Dreamcast, but the graphics were enhanced, so it's actually visually a much nicer game to play. But if you don't have a Dreamcast and you're watching this video, you can always get one of the versions on them as well. So Spider-Man is definitely one to have in your collection. The last game I'm going to talk about is probably one of my favourite games of all time. It's up there with my top maybe 3 games of all time. Now, this game is a game I remember playing for hours and hours and hours, and if you have a Dreamcast, you have to get a copy of this. It is Skies of Arcadia. Skies of Arcadia, I would say, is the definitive RPG for the Dreamcast. It is just huge. The world itself, I mean, you can play this one time, you can play it 10 times, but each time you play it, you will find something new to explore. It's filled with Easter eggs and new things to do and new ways to explore. Now, don't be deceived by the sort of friendly, childlike way that this game is originally introduced. These characters will make you cry, they will make you laugh, and they will make you be on the edge of your seat with each adventure you go on. And you become really connected with the characters, each of the characters, and you meet newer ones as you go through the game. When you get your first ship, or when you get to go out on your first ship, and how attached you are to that ship and the captain. And when you first lose it, it's so upsetting. It's so exciting. It is so deeply immersive. The concept is you are air pirates flying around the skies. There are good pirates and bad pirates. You are the good guys, and there's also the Empire, which is obviously the big baddie. Now, you can draw parallels with something, for example, like One Piece. It's very similar. There's lots of things you can draw on there that you find similarities in, but it still has that danger, especially with some of the worlds. The worlds themselves, the different sections and countries you travel to in this game, are just incredible. They're what make the game so special. The detail that's gone into each one, they're completely individual, and to get to them you actually have to sail to them, so sometimes you can be sailing a really long while to get to a place, and as you cross borders, suddenly the enemies you're running into, they change with the environment, so the monsters will be different, or they'll be different colour, or they won't be susceptible to fire or ice. The amount of detail that's gone in individually to each place is incredible. I mean, the guys have not been lazy creating this, and they're sort of based on real life. Like, you have one place that's very much like Africa, and one place that's very much like the Middle East or Asia, and they all have different things that you can buy that you can't get in the other place. Now, you yourself as an adventurer, people have never been able to get to these lands before, so it always feels like such an accomplishment when you do. The bosses, the huge gigas that are unleashed on the world that everyone's trying to control, but they have come from an incredible imagination. I would say that Skies of Arcadia has one of the strongest musical scores of any game I've played. There has been a lot of work gone into each of these songs, and they fit the world so incredibly well. Like, they are what draws you in to the story of the gameplay. So this game is a game that's only been released on 2 platforms, on the Dreamcast and on the GameCube, where it was released as Skies of Arcadia Legends. They are essentially one and the same game. There are minor differences, and there are a few additions to the GameCube version. But there is one addition to the Dreamcast version that not a lot of people know about, and that's that with the VMUs, like we were talking about in Sonic earlier on, you can plug it in and you can download a minigame on it, in which you steer your ship, and each time you sort of get past the level, you level up, and then when you put your crew levels up, when you put the VMU back in the Dreamcast, you get to keep the levels that you've leveled up with. I just think that's a fantastic addition, and it's another thing that the Dreamcast had that no console ever had. This game is slightly more expensive because it's rarer than most, so don't be put off by that. Do your research, go online, look at some gameplay, look at reviews, do whatever you need to do to justify buying it, but get out there and get yourself a copy of this, whether it's on the GameCube or the Dreamcast, because this game is one for the Hall of Fame. It's good to finally be doing a video about some Dreamcast games. Now, the Dreamcast's a really special console to us and generally to people. It's still got a following today. I mean, they're still developing games for the Dreamcast now, 15 years after it was discontinued. So if you get a chance, go and pick up a Dreamcast. There are so many games that you could talk about on the Dreamcast that we can't cover in this video. So we are going to have a part 2 video with a whole new selection of games done by another one of the Retro Bros. Until then, it's good to be back and it's good to be making some more content. So stay tuned for another episode of the Retro Bros.